When discussing the phrases of condition of England and hard times, there is connotations of a smoggy, dirty, factory-ridden town with blackened smudges of dust on workers' cheeks, some of them mere children. There is a sense of isolation despite increased proximity to others. It certainly appears so from Victorian texts. Through these texts and popular culture, it seems that there are particularly three issues of the time that have endured throughout societal change. These three issues are the coexistence of urbanization and loneliness, the link between the ache of the modern and substance abuse, and a prejudice towards the poor that accompanies a thirst for elitism. These ideas can be comparatively represented in our own 21st century text that echoes Thomson's poetry and Dickens' prose, shown through the novel of My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. Urbanization and its simultaneous alienation, despite the literal closeness of people to each other, is something evident in both Victorian England and today's society. James Thomson's poem of 1880, City of the Dreadful Night, provides textual representations of this concept, with society, despite being densely arranged in the city, shown as lonely through its class division and spiritual abandonment. While Moshfegh's novel was published almost a century and a half later, loneliness is still an experience that continues despite urbanization's design. Moshfegh appears to paint the paradox where one can be both constantly surrounded by people in the bustling city of New York and simultaneously completely isolated. For Moshfegh's unnamed character, this isolation is shown through a complete unconcern to all that surrounds her. Her indifference is particularly pertinent in her ignorance of current events, such as when she notes subway workers went on strike, a hurricane came and went, it didn't matter. Whether the simultaneous existence of isolation and urbanization is sourced in class division and religious disillusionment, or in an uncompassionate indifference for society, these texts offer examples of how loneliness amidst company is not unique to Victorian England. Similarly, the attempt to console oneself with modernity, with substances, is not unique to the 19th century either. In Hard Times, we see the character of Stephen Blackpool's wife who has sunk into alcoholism. Dickens writes in Bounderby's description of the woman that she took to drinking and Stephen now sees her as haggard. Discontentment with existence and the use of substances to cope is certainly something that endures throughout time and is not singularly epochal. Moshfegh's novel provides clear support of this, following the female persona's decision to load herself up on sedative prescription pills for a year in an attempt to avoid the way of life around her. The novel contains sentences such as, "I tried to put everything out of my mind. Valium helped." In some ways, there are moments where both characters are mere shells of humans, floating along solely by the support of a substance. Similar examples riddle popular culture, with tragedies like Amy Winehouse and Chris Cornell. Despite their temporal differences to Mrs. Blackpool, this sense of discontentment and the attempt to combat this through suppressants is something that endures. In conjunction with these previous themes, a prejudice to the poor and a thirst for elitism also seems to be inherent of society despite the time period. In Hard Times, class prejudice is thematically prevalent. A value of status is particularly shown in the character of Bounderby, who lunches on chop and sherry and yet ridicules the lesser Stephen Blackpool by suggesting that he should ever desire venison with a gold spoon. In the 21st century Western society, Moshfegh similarly comments on how her characters are still slaves to vanity and status, which is not unusual in a place like Manhattan. A desire for luxury at the expense of compassion for those whom it is unrealistic to have seems to be unfortunately inbuilt into humanity's nature. Despite these themes being evident in regard to the hard times of the Victorian era, they are not so dissimilar as to feel abstract to us today. In fact, it seems these thematic issues are somewhat inherent to communal existence. Unfortunately, this appears to show some flaws in us as a species rather than a success. Or perhaps it is just a natural reaction to the universal experience of existence and its ability to be a hard time.